Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're headed into our third segment here where I want to talk about the NHL playoff game from last night where the Florida Panthers evened up their series against the New York Rangers with an overtime win. The third straight game in this series that has gone to overtime. It's been massively entertaining up to this point. And the Panthers had dropped the previous two but bounced back with this one, and they were able to pull it out thanks to their power play unit, which had been struggling through the first part of this series, but last night they convert twice, including the overtime game-winning goal where earlier in the game, in the second period, we saw Carter Verhaeghe sort of cut back door against the Rangers, given the numbers. The puck had been popped up, and he was able to sort of almost baseball bat sort of swing it back into the net. So that was their first goal of the night. And then in overtime, just a minute into the overtime period, Blake Wheeler, who was playing in his first game since mid-February, he did get a hooking call. This was super unfortunate for Wheeler, who suffered a really significant leg injury that was thought to potentially be career threatening, and he ends up coming back, and obviously he is the one who ends up sitting in the penalty box as his team gets walked off. Now, it's hard to blame Wheeler himself, and Fox defended him during the post-game, talking about the fact that he was put in a tough position thanks to the fact that Mika Zibanejad had put the Rangers in a little bit of a compromising position with his turnover at mid-ice that allowed for Alexander Barkov to get a fast break opportunity. And I think that Wheeler, he gets the hooking penalty. It very easily could have been a penalty shot. They sort of glazed over it, I feel like, a little bit in the broadcasting room there, but on that breakaway definitely could have been a shot, and Alexander Barkov, one of the best shootout players in the NHL. Now, it would have been fascinating, that matchup between him and Igor Shesterkin, having that sort of one-on-one. It would have been an absolutely massive moment, and could have been, if Shesterkin was able to make a save, a huge momentum boost for the Rangers here, where they were getting outplayed, I thought, down the stretch of this game, especially late in that third period. But, I think that either way, it would have been interesting from that perspective, whether or not Rangers fans in particular, obviously looking at it retroactively here, but whether they would have wanted to put the, puck in the hands of Shesterkin essentially, or at least the game's balance in his hands. But the Panthers end up going up on the power play, and then it was very quick from there, where they end up winning the face-off, and just sort of a bunch of quick passes ends up setting Sam Reinhart up in the slot, where one of the best players you can possibly have taking shots on the power play. Now 31 power play goals since the beginning of the regular season, just on an absolute heater in terms of capitalizing in those moments, and he did so yet again. Definitely not the man that, if you're the Rangers, you want to let go unchecked in a moment like that. But a really tough position either way, how the refs called it, for Igor Shesterkin, who put together another really incredible game. He's been standing on his head just about all series, it feels like, since the start of Game 2, really. I mean, allowed 3 goals in Game 1, but even then, felt like the Panthers attack, that is, was pretty all over him from the start of that one as well. But, last night faces 40 shots and made 37 saves. The Sam Bennett goal in the second period is probably the one that he wishes he had back, where it was almost a little bit reminiscent of the goal from Robertson facing off against the Oilers the other night, where in the third period he had just sort of stuffed it behind Stuart Skinner and that ended up being, the goal that carried them throughout the rest of the game. In this situation in the second period, not quite as big of a moment necessarily, but one where, Bennett was able to just sort of stuff it in that small opening that was on the left post, right post from his perspective, and ends up bouncing off the back of his skate and into the net. Quick side note here on ESPN's intermission reports. I have really enjoyed them up to this point. I think that PK Subban is massively entertaining, and, as a Bruins fan, I feel like I was sort of, as I was growing up, I was taught to dislike PK Subban, which is probably fair to some degree, but I think his analysis is very entertaining, and it's been funny seeing the way that he is sort of almost spewing over Shesterkin's play, which is for good reason. The Rangers are definitely down in this series if it isn't for his play, but Subban's been sort of all over him, and the back and forth a little bit last night between him and Steve Levy was just really funny to me, where Levy was pushing back a little bit. He was also agreeing, obviously, with how great Shesterkin's been, but he did make the comparison a little bit in regards to that Sam Bennett goal, that if Skinner allowed something like that, he would face more backlash for it, which is definitely true, but also with how good Shesterkin's been, the lack of criticism is justified. But I just think the exchanges between Subban and Levy, and obviously having Messier in there, who has been, just so knowledgeable, that I think that ESPN, I'm not a huge fan of necessarily all of the majority, frankly, of some of these halftime reports, and this is ESPN and beyond, but I think that the NHL's network there is one of the best in the business, and I have a really fun time watching it. But some other quick notes here on this game. I mentioned Zibanejad's turnover in overtime. It's been a rough start to the series for him up to this point, where he is yet to net a goal or get an assist. Has not scored a point after getting at least 1 point in 10 of the team's first 11 postseason games. And he had a great opportunity, I believe it was in the second period, where he got a fast break opportunity off of a Chris Kreider pass, but shot it high and wide. That one didn't go. The Rangers are just going to need more production from him, I should say. And to be fair, he got that breakaway opportunity, but the Panthers definitely aren't making it easy either, where their forecheck just continues to dominate. We saw this going back to the Bruins series as well, where the Panthers were really ramping it up. I thought that, I believe that last night was the third time in this 4-game series up to this point where the Rangers were held without a shot on net for a stretch of at least 10 minutes. Definitely fact check me on that if I'm off base there, but I don't believe that I am. But the Panthers are out shooting the Rangers 77-46 in these last 2 games, which does sort of further go on to prove how important Shesterkin's been for them. And like I mentioned, late in that third period, the Rangers just could not get it out of the zone, and the Panthers were just sort of peppering Shesterkin with different shots there, and almost looked like it wasn't going to go to overtime. But, ultimately, the Panthers even this one up. Series is 2-2. That feels like the series is at the right spot as well, where you can definitely make an argument that the Panthers could be up in this, and they definitely feel like they outplayed the Rangers in at least Game 3, possibly even Game 2 as well. But the play of Shesterkin's just been so dominant that we have an even series here, and I hope this one goes 7 because it has been massively entertaining. But let me know what your thoughts are on this series. We are going to be shifting gears here, though, to the NFL, where we're going to be closing out the show today. Have a couple segments here. Going to briefly touch on the Houston Texans signing wide receiver Nico Collins to a new contract extension. We'll give you the details on that. Sort of look ahead for the season here of the Texans, who have a lot of high expectations. And then finally, we're going to be ending off the show. I want to take a very early look here at some of the NFL awards that are coming up for this season, and sort of looking at the top candidates for Rookie of the Year awards, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and MVP. So stick with us, and we will be right back.